So back in 2020, Mariah Carey dropped her memoir, The Meaning of Mariah Carey, and it promised to finally tell the real story behind the larger-than-life icon. But as everyone soon found out, the meaning of Mariah Carey was way more complex, and honestly, a lot darker than anyone ever expected. And right from the get-go, she leans into that persona we all know and love, right? The book is absolutely filled with her signature charm. She's calling her readers darlings and just fully embracing that fabulous diva image. It's exactly what you'd expect from the queen, the Marie Antoinette of pop. But this is where it gets really interesting, because it begs the central question of the entire book: what's actually going on beneath all the glitter and glamour? It's like she uses this persona we all know as a kind of Trojan horse to tell a much, much darker story.
Okay, so let's start with that diva myth. You see, reviewers immediately notice that the book intentionally plays this up. It is just dripping with her famous self-aware wit, and you can practically hear her voice narrating every single over-the-top sentence.
But here's the thing, that glamour, it's just the surface. As reviewers pointed out, this is not the fun, glitzy celebrity tell-all you might have been expecting. Nope. Instead, it's a really serious and often pretty harrowing look at the trauma that made her who she is. And that trauma, well, it started young. The book pulls back the curtain on a childhood that wasn't a fairy tale at all. It was actually defined by some serious neglect, racism, and real, genuine danger, a lot of it coming from inside her own family. And the revelations are just shocking. Carey writes that her older sister, Allison, actually drugged her with Valium. And get this, she was only 12 years old at the time. And the abuse didn't stop there. It wasn't a one-time thing. She also talks about a time her sister threw boiling tea on her, leaving her with third-degree burns. I mean, it's this terrifying picture of just how unsafe her own home was. She even details how her sister tried to sell her to a pimp, putting her in this incredibly dangerous world of adult exploitation when she was still just a kid. So, on top of the direct abuse from her sister, Carey talks about this deep, profound sense of neglect from her mother. And then there was the pain of being a biracial child, getting hit with racial slurs from girls she thought were her friends. It's this feeling of being an outsider that, would later fuel so much of her incredible songwriting. So you'd think when she finally escaped all that and made it in the music industry, things would get better, right? I mean, she met and married this super powerful record executive, Tommy Mottola. But what looked like a fairy tale from the outside was, in her own words, a prison, a gilded cage. And this timeline just shows how fast that dream soured. She signed with him in the early 90s, married him in 93, hoping that it would actually give her more freedom. But instead, his control just got tighter and tighter, turning her life into that prison until she finally broke free in 1997. And she gets incredibly specific about his methods of control. We're talking cameras inside her own house, being followed by security whenever she left, and creatively, he was constantly stifling her, actively trying to, in his words, remove the blackness from her music and her image. He was fundamentally trying to change who she was as an artist.
But here's the twist. She used her art, the very thing he was trying so desperately to control, to plan her escape. Music wasn't just her job anymore. It became her path to freedom. The real turning point was a secret relationship she had with baseball star Derek Jeter. She writes that their connection was the catalyst. It gave her the courage and the inspiration to create the album Butterfly. And that album, it was so much more than music. It was her declaration of independence. It was her breaking out of that gilded cage. And that theme, taking back control, is really the heart and soul of this whole memoir. The book is her deliberately taking the microphone to reclaim her own story, especially the parts that got twisted by the media and, as she alleges, sabotaged by her ex-husband. And this right here is maybe one of the biggest bombshells. She alleges that Mottola, who was the head of Sony Music at the time, went out of his way to sabotage her 2001 film Glitter. She claims he got his hands on her music, specifically a sample she used in her song Loverboy, and then had a nearly identical track created for Jennifer Lopez, making sure J-Lo's song came out first, just to undermine her project. Now, at the time, all we, the public, saw was her infamous appearance on TRL, which everyone just labeled a breakdown. But in the book, Mariah gives us the context we were all missing: this alleged industry sabotage, an absolutely punishing work schedule, and just pure exhaustion.
The anxiety from all of that led to a diagnosis of somatization, which is a condition where your psychological stress actually shows up as physical illness. And you know what? People listened. Her story completely resonated. The moment it came out, The Meaning of Mariah Carey shot straight to #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. The world was clearly ready to hear her side of the story, and the book was a huge success. But when you tell your truth, not everyone's going to be happy. Reclaiming her narrative came with some real-world conflict. Both her sister Allison and her brother Morgan filed lawsuits against her over how they were portrayed in the book. Allison's suit was still unresolved when she passed away, but her brother's case is still going, with Mariah actually scheduled to be questioned under oath. So it all leaves us with this really fascinating and kind of complicated question. This memoir is Mariah's truth, painstakingly told and powerfully argued. But with all these conflicting accounts and ongoing legal battles, it really makes you wonder, in the messy world of family, fame, and memory, who truly gets to decide what the truth is?